Well, thank you, Madam Chair, but due to the Minister's answer right there, I had a different question, but given the Minister's response right there, it has prompted me to ask a further question about this subject. Fine. So I'd like a little bit of indulgence, and I'll try not to be too long.
That's fine.
Yeah, because I think the concept of youth discounts, or as a mitigating factor when sentencing the age of a person, is actually really important. It's certainly one of the topics that we've, on this side of the House, undoubtedly received the most feedback on when people try and get their head around what it is this government's trying to achieve. And even from a philosophical perspective, when you think about what is the purpose, of the law and what is the purpose of sentencing, you've got two very, very opposing and sometimes in stark contrast aims, and that is to respect the needs of the victim. As the Minister has just said, if you're assaulted by someone, regardless of their age, you still feel the need to have that vindication through a legal process. But the other purpose of the law and justice and sentencing is to prevent stuff from happening in the future, to prevent it from feeding into a cycle by taking all the opportunities that you have available to you to try and essentially knock that on the head. So as my colleague, the Honourable Dr. Duncan Webb said, the concept of youth and maturation and development is actually really, really important. So I understand that it doesn't necessarily matter to the person who has a right to feel that they've received justice via a sentence or a harsh sentence on the person that perpetrated that crime against them, but it is something that as a society we should be rightly invested in, because for no other reason than if we don't get this right, then we do create a cycle of just more and more offending, which by definition creates more and more victims of the same crimes that we're trying to lessen the impact on people. So the question I had specifically for the Minister was something that was raised when we think about maybe or maybe not judges choosing to use the youth factor as a mitigating factor a mitigating factor in sentencing. They may not choose to do it in the first instance, given that they know it's only a one-off, an arbitrarily decided one-off according to this bill, regardless of the science and the sensibilities around that. So has the Minister or has his team looked at what those unintended consequences could be in those circumstances? Because nipping something in the bud or at a young person's first appearance and therefore opportunity to provide some sort of corrective direction via a sentence, if that's not taken on board and the judge says, well, actually I'll keep that up the sleeve because there's a chance that this person may be back before this court in the next year or two, and we want to be able to use that factor. What sort of work has been done on looking at that? And also, if we are to consider this, and it's a long bow, but if we are to consider this strictly as a signal and as a deterrent, even though we know that most people that commit crimes don't fully cognitively go into it, weighing up all the consequences of getting caught, etc., etc. It's about addressing the drivers of crime and making a fair and just system so that people don't feel overly punitive and therefore rebel against the very society that we're hoping them to be a part of. But if we consider this as being a signal and a deterrent, I just feel like there's been very scant information to date about weighing up with metrics and analyses what those impacts could be. And I'm sure that the Minister would have gone into more detail and would be privy probably to more of that information. So I just think it's really important, given that this is the stage that this bill is at the House today, that we have an opportunity just to hear a little bit more about this really, really important issue before we move on. And I understand that we will move on. But as I said, lots of people have provided feedback about this. This is the one thing in this bill that really seems to exercise people, because for most humans and for most people, therefore but go anybody. We were all young, we all know that silly things can happen, we all know that that youth and the maturation of the brain and the neurocognitive development of people is a real thing, and we just want to know that this government has taken that into account rather than potentially making things worse in the years to come because they haven't sufficiently taken into account.
And what do you think about Tracey's question? I just noticed I had it on normal speed, not 1.5.
Oh, okay. Well,
That's why it felt like it was draining on forever.
Yeah. I mean, she is right. I mean, what she said about kids is right. I mean, the ministry in the regulatory impact statement, they had limited time to explore all options, which is a classic theme for this coalition. But yeah, currently the way how judges determine sentences is that they can either give an increase, so for anything personal about the situation that make the fact that you offended worse. For example, if you have prior convictions of the same type of offending, a judge may increase your sentence, or reductions, which is important for kids or youth that are going through, because again, kids be dumb. Reductions or discounts for anything that makes the fact that you offended not so bad, known as mitigating factors. For example, if you pleaded guilty early or said sorry, expressing remorse, or if you have personal background that contributed to your offending. So, it could be that you come from a really shitty home, or it could be that you've got a personality disorder, or it could be any of those things that could be addressed through other means, through other treatments, other programs.
You went and stole cigarettes off the back of a carton because your family didn't like a loaf of bread, but they liked cigarettes, according to Fat Toby from The Simpsons.
Yeah, I mean, again, going back to the regulatory impact statements, they don't want whatever this bill is proposing for youth. They want to maintain the status quo because they state that there is strong evidence to show that young people's brain development, in combination with high levels of trauma and abuse in the backgrounds of young offenders, is a logical mitigation at each and every sentencing. So, yeah, and that's in the regulatory impact statement. They don't want what's being recommended in this bill for youth.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, News Guide, the Order Paper Podcast. YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, News Guide, the Order Paper Podcast.